Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Solomon Davila, along with Deborah Bird on this second of a series of webinars we're doing for the implementation plan. Just to check, can you please let me know through the chat, making certain that everyone can hear me? Okay, good. I'm seeing that a lot of you can hear me, which is good. Deborah is going to be on the chat or the Q&A answering any questions for this one webinar, so please feel free to chime in with the chat for everyone or the Q&A, specifically if you have any questions that we can read at the end and address. So I'm going to try to time myself for about 20 minutes going over through this one slide deck and answer any questions at the end. Okay, good. I think it's 12:01, so I'm going to get started here. So this particular webinar is going to be specifically about the plans that are being part of your implementation plan and eventually going to turn into your implementation grant. So this is a very critical step that takes probably some iteration, and we wanted to start off with diving deep into the work plans themselves. As mentioned, this is the second of a series of webinars we have planned this week. You can see in the initial slide that we had last Friday for your last Thursday that we are doing internships, equipment, and then Friday, we're taking a break on Thursday, and then on Friday, we're going to be reviewing the budget as well. So some of what we're going to be doing today may lead into the budget, but definitely if we're giving yourself some time to get into that critical element of putting some categorical spending dollars to this. We also have a webinar coming up next week, next Monday, a week from now, for the Maker Fair, and I think that's next May 1st. I think I understood that we're doing it at 12 noon as well, so I need to update this one. Make sure you register via the email, because when you see that email coming out, that's how you're going to get access to this particular webinar setup. So for today, we're going to review the Maker key outcomes. And these are just to make certain that everyone is addressing these 4 key outcomes in everything that they're doing for this implementation plan and grant application. We're going to review the components of the logic model, and this is because if you've participated in the logic model webinar in the past and developed that with your team, you have some rich information in there that you can draw upon to create your work plan. And at the very end, we're going to make sure that we discuss a workflow for your work plan development. Just to reiterate, when you develop a work plan for this particular initiative, there's actually 2 places that you need to pay close attention to. There's a work plan for year 1, and there's a work plan for year 2. And so there's actually a total of 8 sheets, because inside of each work plan, there's a sheet for each particular outcome. But there's a total of 8 that you need to be responsible for and addressing in this manner. So just to make sure everyone understands that year 1 and year 2 are synonymous in this aspect, and I'm only going to cover the generality of the work plan itself, but there's actually 4 sheets within your files there. Just a reminder, we have several due dates coming up. If you haven't noted them anywhere, May 12th is the Celebration Statewide Meetup materials that are due. The actual implementation plan is the 17th. The 19th through the 19th is a celebration at the College of San Mateo. The 20th and 21st is the Maker Fair participation. Look forward to seeing everyone there. And then the actual grant application is in June 16th. Once again, once you have something for us to review and to receive any feedback, ideally we communicate through your Dropbox folder that you share with Deborah and I, so we can have a method that's much cleaner to transfer our information back and forth, whether it be files, comments, requests, track changes within those files. It'd be easier versus email. As you know, we get a lot of email from different sources. It'd be good to just focus on the Dropbox. Okay, so just as a review, we have several key outcomes that we're trying to address. And Deborah did a really good job in putting this Venn diagram just to visualize the fact that each one of these outcomes may have their own standing uh, objectives and activities, even metrics for themselves. But because it's a Venn diagram, there's some overlapping efforts that will have to be leveraged between each one of these, including right in the middle, there's actually objectives and activities and metrics that meet all four outcomes. And so it's something you want to make sure you kind of even just think out loud a little bit and do a bit of brainstorming, is what activities and objectives and concepts that your team may have that may suffice one of these individual outcomes, or two, or possibly all four of them all together. And then you can then sort them out within your logic model and your work plan a little bit further along. But this is just a good way to just start if you haven't begun your logic model. If you do have your logic model, which would be the ideal situation where you have a list of outcomes and outputs and activities that you've planned and the resources that you're considering for each one of these. If you recall, there's a webinar that you please reference within the website that allows you to understand a bit of the planning and implementation of this project. And although in that webinar, and even in this one sheet, you notice the word outputs is listed in the flow of the logic model. What I wanted to do just for this particular webinar is interject a new term, because you'll see it in the work plan, and that term is called performance outcome. So if you can imagine the outputs within your logic model, which are typically the metrics, the data, the product of the activities, consider them performance outcomes. And obviously you do an activity, and then obviously from that you get a performance outcome. And you'll see how the work plan will actually be these two particular areas of your logic model essentially turned into a much more of a narrative perspective than just a bullet point listing. Here's an example that was shown during that webinar, where the specific outcomes and impact of the CCC maker are listed on the far right of this particular logic model. Again, the two that we're focusing for today are the performance outcomes and activities. For example, in this case, paid internships, increased graduation rates, improved industry inclusivity, and updated curriculum can be, of course, an outcome, a performance outcome of the activities that are leading to those, which are faculty professional development, work-based learning, maker events, regional meetings, social media, technical training, etc. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about resource and inputs more on the budget webinar this Friday. But here's how you read it, and how you may want to get started to finish off this work. At the very bottom, you may see the word evaluation. That's something that will be determined based on all the input from a lot of you, so that will be in the future after you turn in your implementation grant. Let me continue to this next slide, which will give you a sense of how we're going to put all this together. So this is sort of the meat of the webinar here. Many of you may have already looked at the various narrative questions in the implementation plan. And each question is essentially your strategy at your local institution that you're looking to answer that question, right? And there's a list of them that we went through last webinar. So an example that we took here, the strategy for internships. And the question from our narrative says, what is your strategy to develop a work-based learning system through your makerspace that leads to at least 50 internships? So that's the narrative question. Now, you may have your logic model in which you have your outcome as the annual work plan internship there, objective, sorry. Internships are listed there. That's exactly straight from the actual work plan sheet. So you'll see that in your sheet for objective number 1. And then the activity and the performance outcomes that are listed here are essentially, once again, the activities that you're planning to undertake in your implementation plan, which lead to, once again, that particular objective, which leads to the narrative question. So you want to actually see this as a continuum where you're addressing the question and leading up to the activities. that may be informing yourself from the logic model. Again, so all these are connected in many ways. And from there, you have your performance outcomes. Here's an example of maybe number of faculty trained, or number of soft skill badges that you may provide, number of students that are going through that particular training as well, and internships, of course. So you're kind of working down from the narrative question down to the details, as you see here, including timelines, who's responsible of the activities themselves, and then eventually the budget that you're going to be formulating that that will support all this great work that you're doing. So I'm going to sort of pause here for a second and see if there's any particular questions that people may have, because this is one way that you can see the work happening within your implementation plan. Again, I'm going to focus on the activity and performance outcomes. There was a general question here from Armin related to the 1 to 3 fund match objectives. The 1 to 3 fund matching that occurs is, I think it's listed in the strategy for internships here. There's a 1 to 3 funding match that's required for the whole budget sheet. I'm going to go through that a bit further in detail on Friday, where you'll see a formulaic approach to your budget, where you're going to put in a bunch of budget details, and then for every $3 that you're asking, your institution has to match $1. But I think that really goes through across multiple budget streams, not just internships, although it is listed here as a funding match. But it really goes for anything that you're asking for, again, the 1 to 3 match. But again, more on the budget on Friday. Another question about internships: what's the budget baseline? So a bit more on internships, actually, I believe tomorrow. But just to answer that one question, your institution will be provided access to funds from Sierra College directly to fund internships. And so your rate is actually determined based on your institution, since you're the one hiring, sorry, not hiring, the foundation is hiring the student, but you are there at your institution may have your own policies related to student workers and the various categories of ranking of the specific student workers. Okay. So again, you're going to have various narrative questions, over a dozen of questions that you need to make certain that you go through this process and this workflow. Many of them will meet various objectives and are grouped based on these objectives. And some are very general, some are kind of narrow, specific to the objective. And all of them will result with some activities, performance outcomes. So the actual sheet that's in the implementation plan, I try to put all of this together in one slide so that we can just get it all together. It's a straightforward sheet that has the objective numerically listed on the top. It'll say objective 1, 2, 3, or 4, which are then described by the internships, the makerspace, the community practice, and the curriculum design. So it's be very clear that which objective you're addressing for that particular sheet. Again, there's a total of 4 sheets per year, which means for 2 years you have a total of 8 sheets that you're completing. Towards the bottom, you have several columns. The first column is just a numerical identification column, which you'll list the objective number. So if you're addressing objective number 1, it'll be 1. Of course, the objective number will be number 1. And then the activity number is just a numerically increasing number based on your objective. So you'll have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, so on and so forth along the leftmost column there. When you're addressing outcome number 2, of course, the first number changes to 2.1, 2.2, so on and so forth. And that's just to help articulate when we're putting this together, all we can address, or which particular outcome you're working on, or the objective that you're addressing, and then we can just quickly identify that when we have further conversations. The next two columns, the activities and performance outcomes, this is exactly where you'll work with the logic model and your narrative, addressing your narrative questions. This is where we're going to collect these. And so this is where you want to put the activities that you're addressing and the performance outcomes of, again, the measure, the output of those activities will be listed here. And that's how you fill out each particular sheet. So don't forget that there's 4 sheets per year, total of 8 sheets total that this will accumulate. But again, you probably don't want to start here because you want to start in your logic model and your narrative and sort of synthesizing those activities and performance outcomes to then place them here that are going to be a bit more succinct and probably, again, more bullet pointed in terms of the actual listings. Okay, so this is what we had here for the work plan sheets. We definitely want to make certain that you understand that this webinar is being recorded. It'll be placed up on the CCC Maker website once again. And don't forget to contact Deborah or myself if you have any questions related to the implementation plan and in this case, the work plan webinar, but we can definitely answer any questions beyond that. I think tomorrow we have the internships. On Wednesday, we have a little bit of the makerspace technology involved in how you may want to approach that. And on Friday, we have the budget as well. At this point, I'm gonna pause. I think we have maybe about 10 minutes here, and we can answer any questions via the Q&A or the chat window. And I'll be reading some of these Q&As, and some of the folks may not see the actual questions that are being posed here. You actually can, if you use the chat tool, you can chat with everyone, or you can just send the question directly to Deborah and I if you direct your chat to the panelists, which is, panelists would be just Deborah and myself at this point. Okay, I'm here looking through if there's any other questions or general help that people may need. The question about the implementation, sorry, the logic model. Yeah, logic model is a document that you will upload to your Dropbox as well as one of your additional documents that you will be submitting. So I do recommend that you spend some time developing the logic model. Again, as I discussed in this webinar, it's helpful to actually have that first because it allows you to really think out loud and holistically versus the cells in the work plan sheets, which are going to be different sheets themselves. And even to take a further step back, even working with a Venn diagram on a whiteboard and just putting Post-its there if you haven't done that exercise to help yourself out. If you didn't attend a regional meetup and you didn't do the Post-it exercise that Deborah and I did with a lot of you folks, that really helped out to put a lot of those concepts out there to visualize the a makerspace development within your institution. And so just starting with Post-its and putting activities, putting student outcomes, and internship outcomes, your facilities, maybe different constituents there in your institution that you need to consider. This allows you to think it through and then develop your formal logic model and then parse it out to your activities and performance outcomes. So once again, just to clarify, there's an implementation plan that is May 17th, which is different than the implementation grant. So the implementation plan is a bit more of the narrative and the process that you've undertaken, the logic model and such. And so remember, the implementation plan is addressing primarily the narrative as one of those things. And I think Deborah's answering some of those. Once you get to the implementation grant, you really have to solidify your budget and much more of your work plan included in this webinar. Okay, good. There's some. There was another question here regarding the content. Remember, there's the narrative, which is the really your proposal in a way of what your strategies that you're undertaking in your institution. But of course, you synthesize the activities and the performance outcomes of those activities to place in the work plan. But I think this question is related to the implementation plan. So maybe I don't understand that one question as clearly, but yes, all your content should go into the implementation plan spreadsheet. So if that's the question, yes, please reference the spreadsheet, because that's really where the narrative and the work plan and the budget, all that goes into that spreadsheet. There was a question about the matching funds. I think from the very beginning, the matching funds have always been part of the discussion. As a matter of fact, your institution must have turned in a letter of intent way in the beginning, identifying that they understood that there's a 3-to-1 match. So I think that was something that's been communicated for the longevity of this project. And if you need any help in understanding the matching funds, maybe Deborah and I can help out how you can leverage existing personnel, space, activities that you already are doing there to make certain that you submit in the matching fund. So we can get creative there to make certain that you leverage existing activities. There's a question about an updated list of items that will be submitted in the Dropbox. There was in the last webinar that such list that included the implementation plan itself, the various documents of the deliverables from the Kumu map to the logic model, and other aspects that I think we've been undertaking. And even inclusive of images and video links and other things that we definitely want to make sure that you submit to the Dropbox. So please reference the webinar from Thursday for the comprehensive list. There was a question about evaluations of the performance outcomes. We're actually, through this exercise of collecting various implementation plans and inevitably the implementation grants, we're collecting all these to really synthesize what would be an evaluation performance for what you creative folks are developing in your institution. So I think that's an evolving target for us. And so we're going to learn quite a bit from you to develop a thorough evaluation plan for the project in itself. And I should be a bit clear about that. This is the evaluation plan of the project, not necessarily of your institution or for your implementation grant itself. So it's not as narrow to a specific school as really the holistic evaluation of the outcomes. Are we going to reach the outcomes of this whole initiative? A couple of questions also that came in. There's going to be a template that will be shared out with all of you pretty soon regarding the Maker Faire presentation that's coming. Deborah and I, we were on a conference called Thursday, and so that's being tidied up and about to be sent out. Again, all these webinars are going to be listed on the website, so including the PowerPoint presentation on a PDF format, so you can reference them as well. There was a question related to a self-study, which was one of the various deliverables throughout the past webinars in the past, as you were doing your startup process. The self-study could be Word document with data, charts, survey questions. This is, if you recall, that was like, what are your students telling you in your institutions? What are you going to do to address the outcomes of this project, and sort of that strategy in terms of what you're looking at your data related to your institution. And it may not only include data, qualitative information related to your partnerships with your employers as well, if they're strong or lack thereof. So it's really, it could be any format, quite frankly. Word document, but you can also do a presentation, a PowerPoint, or you can get creative and do a whole visual workflow map. So that's really just, the self-study was meant to be an exercise to be introspective about your current status so that you can then articulate where you want to grow to meet the outcomes of this initiative. Okay, I think we're reaching towards the end of the half-hour timeline. I think we've answered most questions that have come through the Q&A and the chat. I'll just hold for a couple more minutes to see if there's any other questions. Otherwise, we may sign off anytime soon. There was a question related to Kumu that came in, and there are some technical questions that I know I've gotten from Kumu, and that's uploading an Excel file into Kumu so that some of you that have been working through Excel can seamlessly do that. I think that's a takeaway that Deborah and I need to take from this webinar, and other folks, that we need to have Will help you through the process of uploading your Kumu map if you have it in Excel, or if just generally have any questions related to that. So I'll jot that down, and we'll respond to everyone the process to get technical assistance for Kumu. Thank you for that question. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in on this webinar. Tomorrow we'll do a little bit more deeper dive on internships. There's definitely several things we want to cover related to those, but we just want to take a brief moment of your time today to answer the work plan details and how to go about that. And if there's no further questions, there's the one that just came in. How are outside project team members to stay engaged during the application process? So this is really your own internal coordination. I recommend that you strategize how you do that. If you have your own method of meeting your advisory team members, or your the team that's feeding you some of this information, I think that's something that, I have a better answer for you. We do have a method to bringing your project team members through the newsletter. So if your team members that are currently active at helping you internally in your institution are not on the CCC Maker newsletter, you want to make sure that they jump on that, since the newsletter isn't as detailed as some of the information that you're getting with some of the direct communication from Deborah, but the newsletter does include that these activities are happening. So it may list, for example, upcoming webinars or upcoming activities or dates of future meetings. And so it'll have it as an aggregate, but definitely a way to have your team members engaged in this process. So we'll make sure that we send out a sign up for your team members for the newsletter. Okay, everyone, thank you so much, and have a great day.